Almost all of the best players in the NBA have one thing in common. They're all proficient three-point shooters to some extent. This is even more so on guards, and the ability to shoot from outside is the most sought-after skill in basketball. In fact, of all 40 players that average at least 20 points per game this past season, only 3 of them shot below 30% from deep. Those 3 being Jimmy Butler, Anthony Davis, and the man I'm here to talk about today, De'Aaron Fox. From a statistical perspective, Fox's numbers are very easy to understand this season. When Tyrese Halliburton was on the Kings, his role as a ball handler had increased to the point where it was hard to envision a pairing between him and Fox being successful. And as a result, De'Aaron's numbers suffered playing alongside Tyrese. Once Halliburton was gone, the full experience of De'Aaron Fox was unleashed, which is the version of him the Kings would expect to have going forward. Fox changes the game in other ways and has managed to become an elite scoring threat from anywhere inside the arc. His craftiness combined with absurd speed and change of direction allow him to attack defenses in other ways that other guards physically are not capable of doing. The main attraction of Fox has always been his speed, but it's his change of pace that takes his speed to the next level and unlocks his full ability. The nonchalant manner and demeanor of Fox on the court can lull defenders asleep, setting him up perfectly to explode by them for baskets. This is what is meant by the term going 0 to 100. One instant Fox is seemingly standing straight up, and in the next he's already at the rim. There's also zero wasted dribbles, no side-to-side moves that go nowhere. He attacks and he attacks hard. With how quick that he can go into full gear, oftentimes it doesn't matter that opposing players may not fully respect his jumper. He uses the space given to him as more free real estate, enabling him to get downhill, rather than give in and settle for a shot. This is a mismatch with Bertans on Fox, and Bertans is naturally giving De'Aaron multiple feet of space, hoping Fox settles for a jump shot. Yet all it takes is one explosive dribble for Fox to get right to the basket for a soft finish. And once you allow Fox to get into the paint, you are done for as a defense. De'Aaron's finishing ability inside is really what has carried his offensive workload so far in his young career. De'Aaron shot at about 71% within 3 feet this season and 65% in the restricted area. Both of these numbers are right around where Ja ranks, although Ja operates at a much higher volume than Fox does. And B-Ball Index ranks Fox 5th among point guards in finishing talent and 12th in the NBA as a whole. While someone like Ja uses more verticality and insane contortion of his body mid-flight to attack inside, De'Aaron is actually much more grounded, despite his off-the-charts athleticism. His added strength over the years, as well as his feathery and soft touch, is what has separated Fox specifically. It's the fact that he manages to display this level of control at the rim while going full speed downhill. He knows how to use his body, lock defenders on his hip, and create angles for himself to get a shot off. And most of the time, these angles that he does create are extremely difficult, but it's something that he's mastered. Getting the ball high off the glass and just before a shot blocker has a chance to come over and erase the play. He can make defenders look silly and absolutely torches anyone without great lateral quickness. Look at how much the defender shifts his feet off of a simple jab step, then leads to another explosive take inside. And then the amount of concentration Fox has to somehow finish his and one while falling to the ground. And he does still have the crazy body control in the air and hang time you would expect, it's just not as prominent as it was, say, in his first 2 seasons. Here, the added strength comes into play as well. He bullies his defender to get to a spot in the paint, then double clutches in the air to finish through contact. Fox is very crafty at creating contact and drawing fouls, although I would argue he should probably get more calls than he already does. He's mastered the art of flailing his arms and exaggerating the impact whenever someone reaches on him while he's driving. His 75% clip at the line this year is respectable, but I would still like to see the number in the 80% range, which I still think is very reasonable for him. Fox also has a pretty reliable floater as well, and over the course of the season he began to integrate it more into his arsenal. He's shown that he can float up above any defender and get these runners to fall no matter how awkward looking they are sometimes. He shot 49% on all floaters this season, which ranks him in the 77th percentile of all players, on pretty significant volume as well, with a total of 117 attempts on the season. To put that number into perspective, it is about exactly what Darius Garland shot on runners this season, who is often regarded as one of the best in the business at this shot. From Eurostep finishes to these scoop lay-ins, Fox can really do a bit of everything around the rim. He may not have a single signature trait, but he's made a mark on his finishing ability because of his well-balanced and impossible to predict package. And he does all of this almost exclusively with his left hand, as it is unlikely he will ever confidently finish with his offhand. When the casual fan thinks of the best ball handlers we have in the league, De'Aaron Fox often is not a name that comes up. Though there are times where he still happens to appear out of control, for the most part Fox has developed a handle just right for his style of play. He complements his speed and quickness with tight crossovers that mesh really well with his attacks at the basket. Fox uses an array of setup moves such as the slight hesitation dribbles, in and out moves, spins, and sometimes even a double cross. But what if I told you that only about 26% of De'Aaron's half-court shot attempts come from around the basket? In fact, approximately 60% of his half-court attempts are jumpers. He only shoots around 39% of all jumpers, but Synergy actually ranks him fairly highly as a jump shooter besides a 3-ball. Specifically, Synergy has him in the 69th percentile on both short-range and medium-range jumpers. This mid-range area is where Fox has thrived, and he's one of the select few players who rely on the midi as the focal point of his scoring. When Fox is hitting this shot, he's virtually unguardable. Defenders are often stuck on their back foot when on Fox because of the threat that he imposes on the drive. So Fox abuses this and uses his quickness to get defenders off balance and backpedaling towards the basket. This just creates even more space for De'Aaron to step into these mid-range jumpers and kill defenses in a multitude of ways. Fox is in the 86th percentile as an isolation scorer and shoots 49% from the field in this aspect. He's Sacramento's go-to scorer and the man they rely upon to generate offense when they desperately need a basket. His isolation frequency isn't quite as high as some of the other number ones in the league, but that is likely for the best. Fox has always tended to only isolate in settings where he has a clear advantage. Examples include working over shorter guards or abusing mismatches when he gets a switch. Here, Fox has a 6'1" Raul Neto on him, so he takes him to the post, where he receives a rare inside the arc pick and roll. This eliminates the chance of a defender helping over, while also allowing Fox to rise up over the smaller defender. This is just an example of a way De'Aaron takes advantage of matchups. And in this game against the Jazz, Fox abused Utah's switching defense to get slower defenders on him and had a field day, ultimately scoring 41 points. And like always, it is all set up by De'Aaron's speed. Bogdanovic is so worried about not letting Fox get to the basket, so Fox decided to torch him from the mid-range instead. This was capped off by the subtle hesitation into a step back that created so much space when it really wasn't even one of Fox's quickest moves, yet it was still filthy enough to give him another open jumper. The only real flaw in Fox's offensive game is his lack of three-point shot, which no doubt is problematic in the modern NBA. Fox was just below 30% on the season, but post-All-Star break he posted a 37% clip. The volume of Fox's shooting also went down this season too. In the 2020-2021 season, he took about 5.5 per game, and that number dropped to just 4.2 in 2022. And Fox is decent on catch and shoot looks, where he was at 35% this season. The problem is that he only takes 1.5 threes per game off the catch, which is to be expected from a ball-dominant point guard. And for the remainder of Fox's attempts from three, classified as pull-up shooting, he shoots a lowly 27%. Fox is an extremely streaky shooter, and you can just take a glance at his shooting splits by the month. When this shot is falling is when he's at his best and nearly unstoppable offensively. There's never been a problem with Fox's shot mechanically. It's a real fundamental, good-looking shot, and he gets good arc and elevation on it as well. But there's a troubling amount of bad misses that makes you wonder if he'll ever be at least a respectable shooter from deep. As Fox has now become more ball dominant than ever, being able to efficiently operate out of the pick and roll is extremely crucial in order to thrive in this league. He's become one of the most prominent ball handlers that we have in the NBA, ranking 8th in the amount of pick and rolls run per game per synergy. Despite his extremely high workload out of the pick and roll, he still managed to maintain above average efficiency in his scoring in this aspect of his game. The quickness and explosion from Fox is often on display when defenders try to ice the pick and roll and force Fox away from the screen. He doesn't mind going away from the pick, and in fact he welcomes it. When he rejects the screen, his percentage actually jumps to slightly above 49% from the field. It's hard to stop De'Aaron because he attacks with so much force and basically takes the guard out of the picture. So now Fox is attacking downhill against a big who is desperately retreating to try and cut off any path to the basket, and we've already seen De'Aaron's finishing ability and touch around the rim, so once Fox gets to this point, it's already too late. Defenders are terrified of Fox when he's driving, and De'Aaron just abuses this. Off this Sabonis drag screen, Shai is going under in what is already fairly deep positioning for a pick and roll. With Shai backpedaling, Fox has way too much space to step into this jumper. This also goes back to his craftiness. De'Aaron's ability to navigate screens is a form of art. Here he uses his Domas screen when the defender goes under it the first time, and on the flip, Fox gets a much higher quality look at a jumper. The understanding of angles that Fox has now is spectacular, and willingness to reuse screens to get better looks. This first screen here, Domas slips and nothing is there initially. Sabonis will again flip it for De'Aaron to reuse it, and Fox sets Kobe White up perfectly. This retreat and hesitation away from the basket freezes Kobe and gets him caught on the screen. Fox keeps the ball high on the drive, then gets a clear lane going downhill against a subpar rim protector. Passing out of the pick and roll is the other major key required for a point guard to be successful, and De'Aaron has always been at least a decent playmaker, and his assist numbers have always impressed. Even though his assists are down this year, like the rest of his numbers, they jumped up once Tyrese was traded. This will be mentioned later in the video as well, but Fox and Sabonis have a natural chemistry playing together. He's looking to hit the roller now more than ever, and with how good Domas is as a roll man, this can't be understated in importance. These quick drop-off passes in the lane aren't the most jaw-dropping displays of playmaking, but Fox has been making this read with ease. He's always looking to attack for himself off screens, so this opens up the potential to make these passes. More times than not, his eyes are pointed at the basket, which keeps defenders honest with how much they respect Fox going downhill. But what I like is when plays slow down and Fox is forced to improvise to create. Like this play against the Bulls, where although De'Aaron has a clear advantage when his man has trouble getting around the screen, the spacing on the strong side of the floor is terrible. So Fox steps across the lane while keeping the ball high and draws both defenders with his leap in the air, and now finally has an angle to hit Sabonis on the roll. He's making reads quicker than he ever has before, with these quick bounces to the roll man off of blitzes or hedges. And I like this play against the Jazz where De'Aaron waits for the window in between the defenders and leads Rashawn to the basket with his pass, setting up a 2-on-1 advantage. But he also showcases some patience and poise under duress as well. Here the Pelicans force what should be a good trap with Fox near the sideline and already picked up his dribble, but De'Aaron gets both defenders in the air with the ball fake and splits them to hit the open man on the perimeter. The Kings also ran more Spain pick and roll down the stretch, which was another area where Fox made huge strides in. Like we already mentioned with Fox being an attack-first point guard, his eyes are focused on the basket, and this helps little defenders to sleep out of Spain and cause miscommunications. This frees up space for Fox to hit his last read, which is the shooter in this case. And beyond just Spain pick and roll, Fox has looked better than ever in kickouts to shooters altogether. Fox comes off the screen going to his right and catches Giannis creeping over into the lane as a help defender. The open man in this case is Trey Lyles on the weak side corner. The only problem is that De'Aaron is a lefty, and this would probably have to be a one-handed whip pass across the court with his right. But that's exactly what Fox does here. Some of the passes that Fox can make can really be mind-blowing. He can find the narrowest and tightest windows and deliver bullets that only his player can get to. I don't think people understand the degree of difficulty some of these passes take, because not every point guard has both the IQ and ability to fit these through. And he knows when to take some heat off the ball and deliver passes with more touch. Most notably so when his player is taller and can get to the ball over smaller defenders. He floats these soft passes up into the sky, but also perfectly placed. But Fox is far from a perfect passer, and he still makes many of the same mistakes that have troubled him throughout his career. He oftentimes will leave his feet without having a real plan, which results in a lot of forced or off-target passes. And Fox can also sometimes make these lazier and soft passes into tight windows, which is not a recipe for success. We've seen that De'Aaron can consistently make these passes, but sometimes a lack of concentration can result in a lot of tip passes and turnovers. This is a play where Fox picks up his dribble in panic mode, following what he believes is a trap off the pick and roll. This leads to De'Aaron rushing this pass to Harrison Barnes that gets tipped, instead of waiting for the better read and Sabonis scouting to the basket. One issue that in all likelihood contributed to the decision to send off Haliburton was the lack of off-ball support that Fox created. He is not an elite shooter and won't necessarily provide great spacing. Since Sabonis has arrived in Sacramento, we've seen a lot more positive signs from De'Aaron and his willingness to move without the ball. An example of that can be shown here. This is a common action the Kings run where Fox will use the LA cut after passing to the wing, then is supposed to come off a pin down and receive the ball on a handoff. But here he recognizes the potential to backdoor his man, and Sabonis delivers his pass right on time for Fox to get an easy 2. Fox has been a whole lot more active as a cutter with Sabonis on the roster, and that goes for the Kings as a whole. The attention that Domas draws in the post opens lanes for players like Fox to cut through gaps in the defense, and they know they'll get rewarded for their efforts. This helps alleviate some of the pressure off of De'Aaron and makes him work a lot less to provide his offense. And although they haven't even played 15 games together, the chemistry between Fox and Sabonis was very evident and became clear that they both bring out the best in each other. Back to the attention that Sabonis draws down low, well, here Fox is the open man on the perimeter, which is where some people will question the spacing that De'Aaron provides. But when Fox receives the ball, he elects not to settle for the shot the defense is giving him, and instead he uses the open space to his advantage and gets downhill where he becomes nearly unstoppable. Things like this get overlooked when talking about spacing and lack of shooting, but when left open you have the advantage to attack just as much as you have to shoot. De'Aaron is, simply put, not a great defender. With this heavy workload offensively, he struggles with focus, effort, and mental lapses on the defensive end, which troubles a lot of Kings fans. When Fox's man doesn't have the ball, he can sometimes be disengaged or going through the motions. This loss of focus just for a split second is enough to put Fox at a massive disadvantage. A lot of times he's a step slow in these closeouts because of this, and many of those closeouts are half-hearted efforts to begin with. This allows for easy blow-by drives and puts a lot more pressure on the rest of the team to account for him. And Sacramento is not exactly a team that has a rim protector you can rely on. And other times when a Fox is caught sleeping off ball, the consequences can be even worse. Too much help combined with too slow of reaction time is all shooters need to get a good look at the basket. It's plays like this where Fox is wandering off of his man, yet he's still not fully committed to doubling DeRozan. This allows Kobe White to step into a wide open shot from deep. And here where, following the screen, Fox completely loses his man, which is a mistake that you just can't make against Jokic. And De'Aaron is still beaten off the dribble way too often as well. There's no reason why he should be allowing this many blow-bys and easy trips to the basket. Sometimes he's a step slow, sometimes he's jumping at a very slight pump fake. Regardless, it creates an easy opportunity for the offense. Here Fox displays some of the closing speed he possesses and recovers very nicely to get into position defensively. But he anticipates a screen and shifts his feet, which allows for a straight line drive, and that just can't happen. When Fox is locked in and engaged defensively, he can be a very productive player on that end. He has all the physical tools and lateral quickness necessary to be a high-level one-on-one defender and is very evident. The way he can cut off drives with his body and have the strength to withstand contact in some of these situations is impressive. And Fox is also very good about swiping and poking the ball away in plays where he's at a disadvantage. Look at the level of activity and effort Fox gives in this play in getting through screens and staying in front of his man. The same goes for pick and roll defense and getting around screens. He has shown us that he has the ability to get around and disrupt screens, it's just that these displays are few and far between. But one aspect of the game that he's always had is insinuating contact on these picks and drawing offensive fouls. And just like I said for the offensive end, I would here also argue that he probably doesn't get enough calls either. But this art of selling contact goes beyond screens. Whenever his man extends his arm, even just a tad bit, there's a good chance Fox goes flying and puts pressure on the officials to make a call. Back to defending the pick and roll, and like you would have guessed, there are just as many plays where De'Aaron doesn't put in nearly as much effort in getting through screens, which just makes the offense's job that much easier. And overall, a big issue with Fox's defense is he just tends to gamble way too much. Instead of trying to stay in front of his man, he often settles for these swipes and pokes at the ball. And although he does have a knack for making these plays, the reward is marginal compared to the amount of attempts that he makes. This is again where you appreciate the effort that Fox gives chasing Curry across the court, but he follows it up with trying to jump this passing lane where he never had the chance to get there in time. De'Aaron Fox is an anomaly in today's NBA, and it's really hard to compare him to his peers with his drastically different playstyle. The only player I can even remotely draw parallels to is Ja Morant, and Ja has surpassed Fox as a player this season. But when you look at a player like Morant and how he performed this season, I think that's where you hope Fox can grow into. Even though De'Aaron has played 5 seasons in the NBA, I don't think he's anywhere near his ceiling. I believe he is a player that will benefit greatly with more help around him, allowing to exert more energy into the defensive end, for example. So with all of that being said, I have no doubt of De'Aaron one day becoming an all-star level player, and from there, the sky is truly the limit.